What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about a new release film on Shudder. I've talked about a few of these this year, and I love Shudder. I talk about them as a streaming service all the time because they're a streaming service for people who love horror, such as myself. They give a lot of great opportunities to horror filmmakers that may not necessarily get the opportunity to release their films with other production studios. And since they're so catered on horror, they've been able to really kind of bring in an audience and collect a really great array of films. And as far as their original releases, I'm not always the biggest fan of the things they've put out original wise. This year has been kind of slim pickings as far as that's concerned. But this is a film that they had distribution for, and that I was excited to see once I read a little snippet of the premise. I saw the poster and who the cast was, and was really excited to give this one a watch. And the movie I'm going to be discussing today is Bad Things. Bad Things is directed by Stuart Thorndike. A weekend getaway for a few girlfriends at a snowy hotel becomes a psychological tailspin and a bloody nightmare. So I was not really 100% familiar as to what I was going to be getting into with this movie because I have not seen Stewart's previous film. She made a movie in 2014 called Lyle that a lot of people reference as like a queer version of Rosemary's Baby, where you take the premise of Rosemary's Baby but put queer characters at the forefront. And a lot of the early reactions to this film that I read said that it was like a queer-coded version of The Shining, which, as a lot of you know, The Shining is one of my favorite films of all time. And so I was very excited to watch a movie with queer representation that would pay homage to a movie like The Shining. And this movie has its moments of being really entertaining, very atmospheric, but for the most part, it fails in its execution, unfortunately. I found myself kind of being pulled in and out of this movie multiple times because there was moments that I was really just like, wow, they're building up tension really well. They're keeping me engaged. There's eerie sound design. There's some really great choices. And then they'd funnel into another scene that just felt kind of useless, and I wasn't 100% sure why it was there. Either recycled from a scene we've seen before or didn't provide a whole lot to the overall story, but I'll talk a little bit more in depth about that when I get into the review. So at the beginning of the film, we're introduced to Ruthie, played by Gail Rankin, who we find out early on. She has inherited this hotel that was owned by her grandmother after her mother had passed away, and she goes to this hotel with three friends. One of them is Cal, played by Harry Neff, who was actually in the Barbie movie this year, who was fantastic in the Barbie movie, and two other friends. They go to this hotel as kind of like a getaway together. It's the middle of winter. There's like an indoor pool, and part of it is Ruthie trying to decide whether she wants to keep the hotel, whether she wants to sell the hotel. And one of the girls there, Fran, you can tell there's like some tension between the two of them. Possibly something happened between them romantically before, but Ruthie is currently with Cal, and so that creates a lot of tension between them. And then they get into the hotel, they get into these rooms, and eerie things start to happen while they're in this hotel. We see people moving around that aren't necessarily there. Each character has their own experience of seeing something, and the movie is supposed to be kind of this slow descent into madness for our characters while there's this dramatic tension building between them. And as I said early on, this movie does a good job in moments building up that tension. I really love the look of this hotel because when you think of something like The Shining, right, you immediately go to like the red pattern carpet. There's a lot of vibrant colors. There's a lot, it's almost like a very dream-like world. This is much different. This is like if you went to your generic Holiday Inn Express and stayed. Everything is very bland looking. The color palettes are really muted and dull, which honestly for this type of a movie I think works really well because it adds to that just kind of somber atmosphere that I feel like the film has for the entirety of its runtime. There are moments of levity in this. There's a couple of comedic beats that I think work well as far as the interactions between the characters, but for the most part, this is the look at our lead character, Ruthie, who is clearly a very fragile person, who isn't necessarily the best person either. It's implied early on that she's cheated on multiple partners in her relationships. She's done a lot of really self-destructive things in her life that have also harmed the people around her. And so a lot of it is looking into her character, her relationship with her mother, getting this responsibility that's clearly been in her family for a very long time. And I like all of those elements. The problem is there's so much filler in such a short runtime that it's very difficult for you as an audience member to be engaged for this very short hour-and-a-half runtime. And especially when you're trying to build a very creepy and unsettling atmosphere as a director, you have to kind of keep us in that world and hold our attention. When you keep pulling out to these moments that just don't necessarily feel like they fit into the scheme of what you're trying to accomplish, it makes it difficult for you as a viewer to just kind of be there and stay in that really unsettling and uncomfortable atmosphere that has been created. And the third act gets very messy. I can kind of see where the director was trying to go with it and what they were trying to convey, but the problem is it's just all over the place, and there's not necessarily enough information given to you up front that when things get very heady psychologically towards the end and some of the twists happen and some of the more intense things that the movie's trying to convey start to happen, they don't necessarily land because you're just like, okay, this was put there because for such a long period of time we were focusing on something that wasn't as relevant or as important. And that's disappointing because, like I said, I see the framework for something really great here, especially having queer lead characters. It's always great to watch horror movies that have queer lead characters and that have queer representation, and I was very excited to see that in this movie, but unfortunately, because the execution isn't as solid as it could be, this movie just left me kind of disappointed. And I'm not saying this is bad by any means. I 100% think that it is worth you checking out and giving your own opinion on it, forming your own opinion on it. It's not terrible by any means. I just think there are so many areas it could have been cleaned up to make something really, truly special. So have you seen bad things? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was disappointing for the most part. I think there are moments that worked really well, but overall I was relatively left unsatisfied, and I wouldn't see myself revisiting this one in the future anytime soon. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. As always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.